Here again is Dr. Michael Brown.
Well, there's never a dull moment here at the Line of Fire. There's always something to talk about of relevance, of interest. Michael Brown, welcome to the broadcast on this Monday, 866-34-TRUTH, 866-348-7884. Yeah, I didn't make this up. I did not make this up. Fox News reported, what's today? What's today's date? Yesterday. Air Force general who spoke of God should be court-martialed, group says. I'm not making this up. In fact, we're going to have on in a few minutes Chris Rodda, a senior research director for the Military Research Freedom Foundation, who is advocating for the court-martialing of the general. I'm not making this up. If I wanted to make this up, I wouldn't say something so crazy, so extreme. And then, over the weekend, I had read that B.B. King, famous blues guitarist, maybe the most famous blues guitarist of them all, had passed away at the age of 89. And I had seen a documentary on him once that mentioned him fathering a lot of kids out of wedlock, but knowing all their names and supporting them and knowing his grandchildren by name, something like that. So I was just reading the bio and where he was rated an all-time most influential or great guitarist or things like that. And the article said that it was reported he had fathered 15 kids out of wedlock and so on, and then went on to say he was a Christian. And it just got me thinking about what that means today. Everybody's a Christian. Some of the raunchiest performers out there, some of the most ungodly people out there, I'm Christian. So I wrote an article about it. Was B.B. King a Christian? Saying, I hope he knew the Lord. I hope if he knew the Lord in his life, that before he died, he got right with God. The article really wasn't about him. I wasn't there to judge him at all. Rather, the article was there to talk about how Christian, even born-again Christian, even evangelical Christian, almost means nothing these days. That's one. And two, to say, look, the world is going to learn what true Christians are and who true Christians are by the way that we live, by the way that we conduct ourselves. So in that light, it's only fair to say maybe the world is not that much at fault by having a wrong view of Christians because of the way that so many in the church have lived. What if we change the way we live? Won't that send a message out to the society as a whole? And I normally don't get to look at comments to my articles, or not many comments, because we post on multiple websites at the same time. And sometimes there only may be 10 or 20 comments to an article, but other times there can be more than 1,000, and then it can be happening at several websites. So I don't even get to read the comments to my articles. And I virtually never, ever respond. For a season, I did a little bit. Some pastors encouraged me just to kind of model how to do it, but time doesn't permit. I'll respond when I can, on our own website or our own Facebook pages, but even there, it's limited. But what surprised me was a very insightful commentator or commenter who very frequently will write comments to my articles, wrote this and felt that there was a racial bias I had for mentioning B.B. King's failings and not doing that with white leaders, which was so bizarre that I decided to write a response, which I almost never do, but it was out of respect for this person's comments. So if you get a chance, check out my latest article, AskDrBrown.org. Check out the latest article. And when you're there, just scroll down to the comments. You'll click to a link, then scroll down to the comments section, and just give your view there. I decided to weigh in. Won't be able to get into a lengthy discussion, but I thought it'd be worthwhile. All right, we come back. Chris Rodda, Senior Research Director for the Military Religious Freedom Foundation.
It's The Line of Fire with your host, Dr. Michael Brown. Get into the Line of Fire now by calling 866-34-TRUTH. Here again is Dr. Michael Brown.
Let me make it clear. We are a militant and aggressive organization, and our militancy and aggression is in support of the U.S. Constitution.
That was the voice of Mikey Weinstein, He's the director of the Military Religious Freedom Foundation. That's a clip from when he was on the air with me last year. Today I'm joined by Chris Rodda. She is Senior Research Director for the Military Religious Freedom Foundation and author of Liars for Jesus. To give you the background, as reported yesterday on Fox News, an Air Force general who recently spoke about how God has guided his career should be court-martialed, a civil liberties group is saying. In a speech at a National Day of Prayer Task Force event on May 7th, Major General Craig Olson credits God for his accomplishments in the military, refers to himself as a redeemed believer in Christ. The Air Force Times reports that the Military Religious Freedom Foundation has taken issue with Olson's remarks as calling for the two-star general to be court-martialed and, quote, aggressively and very visibly brought to justice for his unforgivable crimes and transgressions. Chris, thanks for joining us on the broadcast today.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
So, Chris, I think you're aware that I would be very sympathetic to the general's comments and really kind of shocked by the position that you're taking. So that's where I'm coming from. I want to do my best to help our listeners understand why this is your position. But this is an accurate quote that he should be aggressively and very visibly brought to justice for his unforgivable crimes and transgressions. That's not an exaggerated quote to make your organization look bad. That's really how you feel.
No, that's how Mikey puts things. That's Mikey's language. And I just want to make it clear here, it's not all of when you hear from Fox and the various, like what you just were talking about. It's all about what he said, and that's not really the issue. It's the, as Mikey Weinstein always puts it, the appropriate time, place, and manner. What the problem is here is that this was not the appropriate time, place, and manner, and General Olson violated a number of military regulations, such as endorsing a non-federal entity. The National Day of Prayer event is run by Shirley Dobson's National Day of Prayer Task Force. There are strict regulations against anyone in uniform endorsing a private organization, whether it's religious or not. And then there's also the issue of basically, handing our enemies like ISIS propaganda on a silver platter of, making us look like Christian crusaders and all of that they can use.
Could you explain? Yeah, could you just explain the Christian crusader? Because every true follower of Jesus wants to share his or her faith with others,
right?
And wants others to know Jesus. I mean, that's part of being Christian. You share your faith,
fine, and that's the beliefs of evangelical Christians. We understand that.
Right.
The problem here is, if you look back to the first Gulf War and what General Schwarzkopf did, now nobody would say General Schwarzkopf was anti-religion or anti-Christian, right? In Saudi Arabia, he had the chaplains remove their religious insignia from their uniforms. They had no crosses displayed at Christian religious or Jewish, any non-Islamic religious services. There was the Pentagon put a restriction on news coverage of U.S. troops in Saudi Arabia engaging in non-Islamic religious services for fear that those broadcasts could be used as a propaganda tool. Okay, we're in the same situation now. And I'll just read this quote from 1990. This was a Defense Department official, quoted in the New York Times, and he said, I don't know if it was a he or she, it doesn't say, but he said, can't you see Saddam getting a videotape of a Hanukkah service or soldiers singing Silent Night and running it on TV over and over again and arguing that the Islamic holy places are being defiled? It would be garbage, of course, but it would also be dangerous for everyone. Now, this is in 1990, before there was the threat of, Al-Qaeda was only a year old and hadn't done anything yet, really. Nobody saw them as a huge threat. Nothing like ISIS existed. But it's the same thing. It's not about taking away the religious freedom of our service members, which nobody wants to do. It's about appropriate time, place, and manner, and not doing things that are stupid and dangerous.
All right, so let me reply to the points, and I'm glad that you're emphasizing no one is trying to take away religious freedoms of men and women in the services. Okay, the first thing, talking about what happens in Saudi Arabia in the midst of Islamic fundamentalism, where they have requirements as to what is going to happen or not happen with our American troops there because of their Islamic fundamentalism, has nothing to do with what we do here on the shores of America.
Well, no. So but this is broadcast. This was broadcast around the world.
Right. But it doesn't matter. Right. Thank God. I'm so glad it was. The fact is, listen. But
a lot of our troops who are in areas in Iraq, in wherever, they are afraid of this stuff. They are the ones who contact Murph and say this stuff is putting us in danger.
Right, I know, but but listen,
look like crusaders.
I've studied radical Islam for years, okay, and during my grad work in Near Eastern languages at NYU, I studied Arabic with Muslims and dialogued and so on. So, in point of fact, the Islamic world looks at America as a Christian nation. The Islamic world thinks of us as the worst of sinners in our midst. That's what Christianity is. They look at it like that. All the junk movies we export around the world, they think that's just a reflection of Christianity. But they fully know that we have large numbers of committed Christians who are in our troops, that our coins say, "In God we trust," that some of our national leaders, before we go to war, we're calling for prayer, and that we have many Christians in the high ranks in the military. This doesn't change anything. This guy said nothing that's a threat to anybody.
It violates all of these. These are our military's regulations. The endorsing of a non-federal entity, okay, that can apply to anything. That is the Army's version in front of me that says public affairs activities will not support any event involving or appearing to involve the promotion, endorsement, or sponsorship of any individual, civilian enterprise, religious or sectarian movement, organization, ideological movement, or political campaign. Okay? So right off the bat, this endorsing of a non-federal entity by our military and speakers like General Olson appearing at the National Day of Prayer Task Force event. This is not an official government event, although Shirley Dobson, who runs it, their organization do everything they can to make it appear
but
that
you're saying that
event, but it is not.
So you're telling me that I can go across the country and I will not see any soldier in uniform ever appearing at a private event? They won't show up at a church service and share
it. It happens.
But you're saying they're not supposed to. In other words, someone
in violation of regulations.
All right. So I'm going to have later in the show, another attorney will come on from the ACLJ, and I'm sure we'll have a perspective on it. But are you then backing away from your comparison to what happens in Saudi Arabia, because you recognize that ISIS and these groups?
The comparison is that.
Because that's Islamic fundamentalism there, and we were in the midst.
Wait a second. But are you saying that our enemy now is not Islamic fundamentalists?
They are, and they've branded us. The fact that a general talks about that loving Jesus and God being with him, that doesn't change anything. That doesn't threaten our troops. You think that our troops in Iraq, that the Iraqis are thinking, oh, these guys are Muslims. Oh, these guys have no religion. No, they know that there's a large percentage of Christians in our midst. The only issue in 1990 was the fact that we had this broad coalition that was all going in against Iraq, and there is Osama bin Laden. And just listen, Osama bin Laden. Hang on, let me, Chris, let me finish here. Osama bin Laden, in a famous Arabic article that was broadcast all over the Islamic world, said that one of the great offenses was that Saudi Arabia was being defiled by an American presence, just the presence of troops there. So there was an issue of hypersensitivity. But the idea now that in our own shores, that in America, that someone, a military person, cannot appear at a church service in uniform, say, hey, we're going out. There's a major war. We're going out to take out these Islamic radicals. Please be praying for us, or speak at some kind of banquet and come in uniform. That person will get a standing ovation for defending our countries. And often, when I'm at the airport and someone in military uniform is getting on, there's special honor. You're saying now that we've got to run things the way we did in Saudi Arabia, as if there was Islamic fundamentalism here?
We need to we need to not have. And the National Day of Prayer event, because it is the group that runs it, their mission is to evangelize the whole world. Okay, so it's not just that these someone like General Olson is saying this as a personal thing. This is him saying that, at an event where we want to spread Christianity to the whole world. Okay?
All right, hang on. We got a break. We'll come back to that because I thought you agreed with me that it's understood that all evangelical Christians and true Christians want to spread their faith around the world. I thought we agreed on that, so I'm still not getting this.
It's The Line of Fire with your host, Dr. Michael Brown, your voice of moral, cultural, and spiritual revolution. Here again is Dr. Michael Brown.
I'm just a Christian who happens to be in the Air Force. So we all have things we do, but we're believers, and we love Christ, and we love this nation. And that's the point of America. We get to be out and about in America as believers in the various places God appoints us. And I'm just gathered with a bunch of those today. So I'm thankful for that.
All right, those were the words of Major General Craig Olson speaking at a National Day of Prayer Task Force event May 7th, because of which the Military Religious Freedom Foundation is calling for him to be court-martialed and feels he is guilty of, quote, unforgivable crimes and transgressions. Chris, I know you're passionate about this. You seemed a little uncomfortable with the unforgivable crimes and transgressions, quote, because those weren't your words. You said that's the way Mikey...
That's not how... obviously, Mikey and I use different language, pretty different language. But we were talking about this general violated, I don't know how many regulations, just blatantly violated like I said, the one with the endorsement of a non-federal entity, Air Force Instruction 1-1, leaders at all levels. Okay, they're talking about must ensure their words and actions cannot reasonably be construed to be officially endorsing or disapproving of or extending preferential treatment for any faith, belief, or absence of belief. So a general, very publicly, being broadcast and streamed on the internet, getting up there and basically saying that everybody should be a Christian. I mean, he said towards the end of his speech, he said to pray for the Defense Department leaders who, quote, need to humbly depend on Christ. So he's saying all the Defense Department needs to humbly depend on Christ, and that to pray for the troops preparing to deploy so they can, quote, bear through that by depending on Christ. Now, he is...
Well, isn't he talking about Christians already?
Christianity specifically... For every Defense Department leader, every one of our troops who are preparing to deploy, okay, that is in direct violation. No. He was speaking.
He's speaking to Christians. Chris, let me respond. He's speaking to Christians about Christians. A large percentage of the troops are Christian. A large percentage of the Department of Defense people are Christian. So he's saying,
he didn't qualify that by saying.
But that's his audience. He's speaking to a Christian audience.
Will bear through by depending on Christ. He was talking about all troops, all departments.
So that's
leaders.
All right. So just to be clear, then, not just a general, anyone in the armed forces in uniform cannot say, "I'm a Christian and I'd love for everybody to become a Christian." That's illegal.
Appropriate time, place, and manner.
It's a prayer gathering.
It's a prayer gathering. Let me give you an example of appropriate time, place, and manner. If this general were speaking at a Christian prayer breakfast on base, the chapel-run official event, okay, but run by a chapel-run Air Force event that was a Christian event, okay? And he said these same things, there would not be the issue, okay? The issue is that this was first of all, non-federal entity, endorsement of a private organization that is highly sectarian as well as political, okay? There's also that his being
Could he speak at a church
service?
Could he do this at a church service on a Sunday morning in uniform?
Not a private church, no.
You're sure? You're 100% sure?
Absolutely. Remember General Boykin speaking in uniform at churches. and George Bush, the Bush administration, censored or went after him for doing so in uniform.
All right, so just want to be clear.
Because you have all these people now saying it's the Obama administration that's anti-Christian, okay? But look, the stuff that happened, the Pentagon regulations in the first Gulf War, that was the first George Bush. The going after General Boykin for his, speaking in uniform in churches, that was the second George Bush.
Wait. But hang on, I didn't mention President Obama. But what intrigues me is that you said if he did this at a chaplain-sponsored event in the military, it would have been fine. But we're getting our check.
No. Let me just say,
a Christian event.
Let me clarify one difference here. Let me clarify one difference here. If it is the National Day of Prayer, the whatever act of Congress created that back in the Red Scare stuff, whatever. Okay, that is supposed to be a day for people of all faiths. Okay. That is not supposed to be Christian specific.
But we weren't talking about that. But hang on, you said
task force.
You said though, Chris, you said that he could speak at a Christian-sponsored military event that a chaplain said.
The circumstances
but the fact is, if he did that, he'd get blasted. The fact is, when a Christian chaplain counsels someone about Christianity and gives them Christian values, they're getting blasted. I mean, everything I'm hearing is an attack.
It depends on how and when the circumstances for every single case are different. Now, 96% of the service members who come to MRF, 96% of MRF's clients are Christians of one type or another, Catholics, mainline Protestants, whatever. Okay, now we're often, misrepresented as being an atheist organization. We are not. The overwhelming majority of our clients, staff, and volunteers are Christians, including a number of Christian ministers.
And they share the gospel with Mikey, and because Mikey is, well, I'll tell you this: there are enough Christian leaders you mock in the most despicable terms. I can't even quote this stuff because it's too profane, and this is a Christian show. And the fact that many of my colleagues
from the Christians, if you want profane,
it's all it's hate mail. Here's the difference. Here's the difference, Chris. Here's the difference. All right, and we're out of time, but I do appreciate you coming on. Here's the difference. The hate mail is from people who are not in the public eye. The hate mail is from people, every Tom, Dick, and Harry, and I'm ashamed that some of them call themselves Christians. That's despicable and unforgivable. But when you are a public organization. Look, Mikey on his show told me how extreme they are and that you're the PETA of these groups, or like the Malcolm X type. It's self-defeating. The only and I got to go here because we're out of time. You hurt yourself with the rhetoric. The reason people think these extreme things about you is because of the rhetoric. It's divisive, it's unhelpful, and it ultimately hurts your cause. And it's going to get a tremendous religious response against what you're doing. So appreciate you coming on. We're at it. We're
coming from the religious leaders in the Christian organizations. It has the same effect on non-religious people and mainline.
Hey,
Christians.
And wherever it's out there, I do my best to correct it, but it's not going to come from my lips. Hey, we're out of time, but thanks for coming on, Chris. Maybe we can do this another time. I appreciate it.
Sure. Thanks for having me on.
All right, friends, you heard it there. I'm going to continue the conversation on the other side of the break with Matthew Clark from the ACLJ. If you say, I'm losing the show, hey, just go to Ask Dr. Brown, askdrbrown.org, and click on Listen Live to keep listening. We'll be right back.
It's The Line of Fire with your host, activist, author, international speaker, and theologian, Dr. Michael Brown. Your voice of moral, cultural, and spiritual revolution. Get into The Line of Fire now by calling 866-34-TRUTH. Here again is Dr. Michael Brown.
Finally, though, and mostly, I'm thankful that I'm a redeemed believer in Christ standing here right now.
Those were the words of an Air Force general, Craig Olson, who has come under attack by the Military Religious Freedom Foundation, who is calling for him to be court-martialed and aggressively and very visibly, this is a quote, brought to justice for his unforgivable crimes and transgressions. I just had Chris Rodda, Senior Research Director from Military Religious Freedom Foundation, on and told her how strongly I differed, not just with the position they're taking, but the rhetoric behind it. I am now joined by Matthew Clark from the ACLJ. He is Senior Counsel for Digital Advocacy in the Washington, D.C. headquarters. Matthew, welcome to the Line of Fire.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for covering this important issue.
Yeah, I started the interview with Chris saying, you know, the folks listening to him, my listening audience preponderantly would be completely against where they're coming from, and let him know I had Mikey Weinstein on my show previously and said that the quote actually sounds so extreme as to be unbelievable, but I wanted to give her a chance to weigh in with her position, which was equally extreme, Matthew, as you know. And her big thing was that it was not the right time or place, that by doing this, that the general was in violation of numerous codes, military in general, Air Force in particular, and was giving his endorsement to a particular religion and to a particular private non-governmental group. So as an attorney, how would you respond to that?
Well, listening to her just speaking now, the representative from this organization that has gone out of their way to characterize Christians in our armed forces, and let me just use the words they use, monsters, bloody monsters, gangs of fundamentalist Christian monsters. These are the kind of language that they use about Christians in the military. It was quite dumbfounding. And in this situation, you have a General Olson who merely did the exact same thing. Keep this in mind, that the President of the United States of America, the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, did at the exact same time, calling for Americans to pray. President Obama and every president before him going back decades has spoken about the importance of faith in their lives, yet that's the Commander-in-Chief, yet this individual in our military is being called on the carpet for doing the exact same thing. And it's just absolutely reprehensible.
Yeah, reprehensible for sure. And again, it's such a radical position. What do you make of what motivates it, Matthew? Because it seems so self-defeating. We've got a minute here before the break, then we'll come back and discuss this more. But what would motivate such extreme rhetoric?
Well, it's an extremist position. It's a hate for Christians, and I don't know what stemmed that for Mikey Weinstein and this organization, but they have consistently opposed Christians at every step of the way, using the most offensive rhetoric to try to not only, in this situation, they not only want this person punished, but they want him visibly punished. In other words, what they want to do is make an example, and what they want to do is silence Christians in the military, and that's the bottom line.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly how it seems. And when they say that 96% of the people writing to them are, quote, Christians, it makes you wonder what kind of Christians. All right, listen, we come back. I've got a few questions about religious liberties, about what can and can't happen in the Air Force, and then the larger attack on Christians that you are monitoring with the ACLJ. So we'll be right back. If you've got a question for Matthew Clark, Senior Counsel for Digital Advocacy with the ACLJ, give us a call at 866-34-TRUTH, 866-348-7884.
It's The Line of Fire with your host, Dr. Michael Brown, your voice of moral, cultural, and spiritual revolution. Here again is Dr. Michael Brown.
Welcome back to The Line of Fire. We're talking about the latest extremist attack on religious freedoms in the military coming from the Military Religious Freedom Foundation. Michael Brown here. If you'd like to get in the conversation, 866-34-TRUTH. My guest is Matthew Clark, Senior Counsel for Digital Advocacy with the ACLJ. Matthew, you mentioned that this is part of a larger issue. This is just a symptom of a larger issue where an Air Force general speaks at a Christian prayer event, and now an organization literally wants him court-martialed. Again, it's one of these things that I would think was from a bogus website or one of these farcical websites that reports false news, except when I saw who the quote was attributed to, I thought, well, that could well be. How widespread is this, in your judgment, in the military today?
Well, especially with Mikey Weinstein's organization, they use every opportunity they can to find any instance where they can push for the same type of thing, calling for court-martials in the most bombastic language of any Christian who would speak out. There was a situation not too long ago of an individual, a student in a military academy, where there was a board outside, a whiteboard outside their room, that anybody was able to put up pretty much anything they wanted about events or a quote of the day or anything they wanted. He put a Bible verse, kind of a life verse up, and military religious freedom went after him as well. This situation is repeated, and it's not just from this organization, but others as well, and targeted at our military and trying to out and expose Christians as something that they're not. Trying to paint them in a negative light, trying to essentially silence them, use the rules and regulations of the military to twist them and to call out individuals so that they can use this as a way to silence Christians as a whole in the military, making them fearful that what if my prayer is something that would get me in trouble? Even if this person isn't court-martialed, having the public news about this would be enough to make some fearful about speaking out about their own faith in the military, and that's exactly the point these organizations try to accomplish.
All right, what about someone in the military in uniform speaking at a church service, speaking at a private prayer event, something like that, saying, I'm a Christian, pray for me, God can use me? Are there laws that actually forbid that, as Chris Rodda of this radical organization is arguing?
There are certainly regulations in the military that restrict what can and can't be done while you're in military, or while you're in uniform, how you represent what the United States military and the positions that the military takes. There are clearly rules governing that. However, there is still a First Amendment that protects the religious liberty of everyone, including those in the military, and DoD regulations make that very clear. So this is not a situation, and listening to the words of his speech, because it's important what he says. And it's interesting that the representative you spoke with earlier, said it didn't matter what he said, that it mattered where it was. It was a time, place, manner thing. Well, it's very important what he said, and nothing that he said would indicate to anyone that the military was endorsing religion. He compared it to ISIS propaganda. Well, that's absolutely reprehensible. ISIS propaganda is when individuals are dragged out, Christians are dragged out onto a beach and beheaded. That's ISIS propaganda. This has nothing to do with that, and is absolutely absurd to even compare what he said, asking for people to pray for him and others in the military, to what ISIS is doing in their use of propaganda.
Yeah. Again, it's so stunning. This is one of these situations. In fact, when I had Mikey Weinstein on, I don't know, a year or two ago, he went right at it, said, yeah, you want the extremist quotes, you're going to get them from me. And you think, okay, he must be pushing a button with someone, because, as I said to my guest last half hour, it's so self-defeating to do what they do and to use the rhetoric that they do, but they must be pushing a button with somebody out there somewhere. Who are they appealing to with that kind of language?
Well, with that kind of language, they're getting in front of the public and getting a face to what their cause is. But unfortunately, we've seen the Pentagon actually bring in Mikey Weinstein and others like him as kind of consultants, as they are fearful of this organization. This organization doesn't win lawsuits, doesn't win cases in court, but the military is fearful because of the publicity that this organization gets, that Mikey Weinstein gets, and he tries to use that publicity, even negative publicity, as a way to silence those in the military and put pressure on the top brass in the military to issue rulings, to make statements that they can turn around and use to try to silence others or keep that speech limited and the religious exercise of Christians in the military limited. And they do this over and over again. And the more times that you repeat a lie, someone starts to believe it. And that's exactly the situation you have here.
And then you have with the abolishing of don't ask, don't tell, so now open practice of homosexuality in the armed forces. Then if you have someone who has a Christian difference with that, now you've added more fuel to the fire for the real opposition to the expression of the Christian faith in the military. So are you seeing this, Matthew, as somewhat of a perfect storm now with what's happening with open homosexuality in the military, now even the call for open transgender service in the military? And I appreciate everyone who wants to serve in the military. That's not the issue. The issue is what's an appropriate setting and everyone's best interest and what is not. But from the attack on religious freedoms in general, now to the specific attack on Christian values within the military, is it kind of an increasing perfect storm because of these things happening at the same time?
Well, it's just a couple of years ago, there was actually a training paper that the military was using that called conservative Christians, that called evangelicals extremists because of the positions that they take, because of holding to biblical principles in Scripture. And that was rolled back. But that is the kind of thing we are seeing. And if you don't speak out, if you don't take action, if you don't go ahead and write a letter to the military and explain the legal fallacies of the claims that those like Military Religious Freedom Foundation is making, then you end up losing because oftentimes when you don't speak out, these things kind of build on themselves, and we're seeing it continue to build. So that's why you have to make your point or make your voice heard and fight back. They're going to the military. That's what we do. We're constantly writing letters to the military, explaining the law, explaining who this organization is. That's one of the top things we do, is explain who this organization is run by Mikey Weinstein and the things that he said, so that they know who they're dealing with, that they're not dealing with somebody above board, but they're dealing with somebody with an aggressive extremist agenda.
Yeah, well said and not exaggerated with a syllable. Hey, I've got one last question for you. I see in your bio that you are Senior Research Associate for the Oxford Center for the Study of Law and Public Policy at Harris Manchester College and Oxford University. Joey, grab clip number 9. This is from a David Cameron speech, interestingly, speaking last month, so Easter 2015, about the unique place Christianity plays in UK's past and present. Clip number 9.
And for all of us, it's a time to reflect on the part that Christianity plays in our national life. The church is not just a collection of beautiful old buildings. It's a living, active force, doing great works right across our country. When people are homeless, the church is there with hot meals and shelter. When people are addicted or in debt, when people are suffering or grieving, the church is there. I know from the most difficult times in my own life that the kindness of the church can be a huge comfort. Across Britain, Christians don't just talk loving thy neighbour, they live it out in faith schools, in prisons, in community groups. And it's for all these reasons that we should feel proud to say, this is a Christian country. Yes, we're a nation that embraces, welcomes and accepts all faiths and none, but we're still a Christian country.
All right. Great Britain is far less Christian than America, percentage-wise and in many other ways. David Cameron aggressively pushed to redefine marriage as prime minister, and yet he makes that speech. What do you make of that, Matthew?
Well, it's unfortunate that our own president has gone out and said the exact opposite thing, that America is not a Christian nation. And what you see here is, now, I say our current president, but presidents in the past have echoed what Cameron has said. Yep. And America is a Christian nation. It's even been acknowledged in our own Supreme Court cases down throughout history. And it's important to remember that. It's important to remember the backbone and the basis upon which America was founded. And as Prime Minister Cameron stated exactly correctly about his nation, but as our nation as well, we were founded on those principles. People are free to believe what they wish to believe, but it is those founding principles, those founding Christian principles, things that Mikey Weinstein's organization abhors, that actually allows us to be a moral leader in the world, that allows us to defend Christians and those of other faiths that are being targeted by radical Islamists the world over.
Yeah, well, Matthew, appreciate deeply what you're doing. Please give my regards to Jay Sekulow, and keep the fire burning. We need you guys on the front lines.
Thank you.
All right, friends, go to aclj.org to find out more.